Third down and 20.
Another AFC team, and instead of making the playoffs for the first time in 17 years, they're missing the playoffs for the first time in I don't even know how many years. It's been a while. It's been a long time.
What was the year they got was that it was 2008, I'm pretty sure, where Brady got hurt and they put in Matt Castle. It was the year after the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure.
But man, the Patriots, what a rough season as a Patriots fan. Fall from grace. I mean, you kind of saw it coming when Brady left, but
Yeah.
Real quick.
And plus,
what were you going to say?
And plus, like, they had so many players opt out of COVID, you know?
Yes.
They lost a good chunk of their team.
So, really quickly, I wanted to do a Patriots season review. So, first off, let's start with Cam Newton.
Oh, God.
What grade are you going to give Cam Newton for this year, Mr. Steed? If you had to give him an A, B, D, F, whatever, what grade this season are you going to give Cam Newton?
I mean, dude, first few weeks, Cam Newton, I probably gave him like a B minus. You know, like remember the Sunday night football game against Seattle? I'm like,
okay,
a
B minus for the first couple weeks. I feel like that's harsh. I would have given him an A.
I don't know, dude. It's just like it was still like a little funky though. Like it just like the passing numbers weren't totally there, but like now, like the season's gone throughout. Like, I mean, dude, I'm gonna be really harsh. I'm gonna give him a D plus. You know. You kept them in some games. You won some games that you were not favored in, but like at the end of the day, like a team where like in the beginning few weeks we're like, okay, the Patriots should still compete, to now where it's just like, you know, like Cam Newton's not the guy. He clearly is not the guy. It was a 1-year contract and it's on the veteran minimum. So like, why not if you need a quarterback? But you know, like what you get out, what you know from Cam Newton moving on from, especially if you're in Patriots organization, is that he's not the quarterback, and I don't know if Cam Newton can really be a starting quarterback in the NFL anymore. So like they'll be shopping for a QB. So I give Cam Newton an E, solid D plus. He's going to have to retake the class.
I'm going to give Cam Newton a solid C for this year, 75, maybe 74. And for a couple of reasons. The first off is that the Patriots offense has about absolutely nothing going for them. They had a good offensive line. I'll give them credit. A lot better run blocking than pass blocking, in my opinion. But they could run the football and they could pound the rock. And it showed in some games. You know, they were able to get an upset win over the Ravens on primetime. They were able to destroy the Raiders earlier in the season.
They beat the crap out of the Chargers too.
Yeah, and they absolutely tore the Chargers a new one. They beat the Cardinals. This Patriots team beat some good football teams this year.
They did.
But for as many times as they did that, Cam Newton was unable to consistently move the ball through the air for whatever reason. Whether it's definitely partly on him, but it's also partly on the fact that their receivers are pretty bad. The only real bright spot this year has been Jacoby Myers. Yeah, Damiere Byrd's been all right. Tight end play's been pretty bad still, even though they drafted 2 tight ends. James White has been inconsistent, which is in part due to the tragic events that happened to his family. So I'm not gonna like criticize him for that. It's just reality. And it's really unfortunate what happened to them, but it hurt this football team. He was a leader of this football team. And you've seen with him not playing as well and not being around the facility during that middle stretch of the season, they struggled. The only real bright spots of their offense has been their offensive line and Damian Harris, who's gotten now banged up.
Yeah.
And the offense as a whole, I'm probably going to give a C as well. Offensive line, I'd give a B plus. I think that they could definitely get better in their pass pro. But in general, offensive line, it was much better than last season. I'll give them credit. That rookie right tackle looks really, really good. Receivers, I'm giving them a D. Receivers need to get better for this football team. They struggle to create separation. They have no guy that they can consistently rely on to beat one-on-one coverage. It's really bad. They need help at receiver. Tight end, I'm going to give a D as well. Maybe a D plus. You know, they came in, you weren't really expecting too much. They didn't really spend high quality draft picks on these guys. But you would have, and then again, tight end is a developmental position. So I'm not going to say that these guys suck for years to come. It's just the fact of the matter is that they needed help at this position this year. It would have been nice to have a good quality vet around this season.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting a D plus. Not saying that the jury's out on them, but for this year, you let the team down. And running backs, I'll give a B minus maybe. Damian Harris had some really, really good football games, and he's a great bright spot. But at the end of the day, the position group as a Rex Burkhead had a few good games. Sony Michel's now back. James White has been all right here and there. You know, we just touched on him. But they didn't have a running back or running game that they could really rely on consistently.
Yeah.
So I have to give you a B minus. It was there for some games. You could rely on it some games. But at the end of the day, if you want to compare the Patriots running attack to a really top tier running attack like the Titans, like the Vikings, even the Browns, it's nowhere near as consistent and as good. So I can't go out here and give you a B plus or an A. You're okay, yeah, you're slightly above average when you compare it to like the Texans or the Steelers nowadays. Like, okay, you got a better run game than those teams. But it's not like you're an elite level, incredibly above average. It's just too inconsistent. What would you give the position groups for this Patriots team if you were to grade them out?
Receivers definitely a D minus. I don't really have to go too much on that because they suck. They all suck. They're terrible. Elman's dropping passes out here, and you're right. They just don't create any separation. It's like they're too slow off the ball. And God, who's the guy they drafted again from Arizona State, the first round pick?
And Keel Harry.
Yeah, and Kill Harry. What a bust!
What a disaster, man! What a disaster of a pick.
Belichick to take it, that's the first receiver he's ever taken the first round, and Belichick's done few wrongs in his career, but Jesus, that might be his worst miss because like that has just not panned out. Where last year it took him a while to get on the field because he was hurt, comes in, doesn't really make an impact, and this year, like, is it because Cam Newton is haltering you there? But still, you're just like not producing anything, like, I mean, I've seen DJ Moore put up numbers with Kyle Allen. So, like, I'm figuring if you're a first round pick, you should be able to put up pretty decent numbers with Cam Newton. And then, yeah, I think your grade on tight ends fair. Really
It's
haven't done
harsh
too much.
though. It was a little harsh.
Just the whole team really has like the offense is just like just it's inconsistent, but like the running game is, I would give a C plus. Damian Harris has had some really good games. James White's always a reliable source when he's on the field, and Sony, like, still for a first round pick, I feel like you got to put him like, I know he was pretty like huge in that Super Bowl run they had a few years ago, but like since then, when has he been productive? He's been hurt. And when he's on the field, it just feels like he doesn't really give anything. I don't know. And I give him a C plus just because like Damian Harris, that's a piece they could move forward with, next year when they're trying to like reshape up and redo this thing. But that's what I would give like the offensive group.
Yeah, real quick before we get to the defensive side of the football. One of the things that I don't like about the Patriots' usage of Sony Michel is that I feel like they're not putting him in the role that he was successful at UGA. He was kind of that because they had that thunder and lightning almost of Nick Chubb and Sony, right? And Sony was almost the lightning to the thunder of Nick Chubb. And right now it feels like the Patriots backfield is their thunder and lightning is that Sony Michel is the thunder and James White is the lightning, which for good measure. I mean, James White is a better third down back than Sony Michel is. He's proven that.
Mm-hmm.
But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I think that there's not enough space in that run game for Sony Michel to work with. He's not the type of back that really fits the system they have right now. And the other problem is that he's just had nagging injuries. He's had injuries basically every year now. And I think that those are just starting to take a toll. So, in terms of was that pick a bust? In a sense, yeah, you'd have to qualify it as it was like more overpay than a bust, though, because you're right. When Sony first came into the league, he was incredibly productive. The scheme, I think, has since changed since he was drafted. Yes, the pick is a bust, but is it a terrible pick? I don't think I'm going to qualify it as a terrible pick. It was a
Yeah.
bad pick, and it definitely could have been better, but it's not an N'Keal Harry level of atrocity where
Yeah.
N'Keal Harry, he's not even like you expected him to be good, and at the very minimum, a threat in the red zone. A guy that it's like, okay, if I get him one on one, I can throw the ball up to him and he'll come down with it, right? He
Mm-hmm.
has been unable to do even that, let alone like anything else. So,
Yeah, it's like a Laquan Treadwell pick, like a guy taking the first round and just has done jack shit with his career. Just kind of
and
balling, even though he scored touch.
I don't want to say the jury's out on N'Keal Harry because, like, he's still a young guy. He can still improve. I wasn't a fan of him coming out. I'm still not a fan of him, unsurprisingly. So, even though I said I'm not going to say the jury's out. And Keel, I'm sorry. I'm giving up on you. If you turn it around, all credit to you, my friend. But let's move on to the defensive side of the football. What would you grade the defense for the Patriots this year at?
I give him a solid B. I this defense, the offense can put them behind the eight ball some games, but like you said, they've had games where like they shut out the Chargers. They've played really good against the Ravens, and even back to that Chiefs game where like Cam Newton had COVID and they had to play Hoyer and Stidham. I thought the defense played pretty well against the Chiefs that week, and really the corners, with Stephon Gilmore and Jackson, it doesn't really get much better than that. Honestly, that's a pretty dynamic duo right there. Like safety's always been a huge play for them. Now you got to remember they were out with their probably, after Gilmore, their best defensive player in Hightower for the whole season too. So that's detrimental. That sucks. But for what it's given, I mean, the reason why they're in many of these games is because their defense are able to make stops and give their offense a little bit of a fighting chance.
Yeah, I'm going to separate the defense by, instead of just going by position, just to do it a little bit quicker, I'm just going to separate it by front seven, which is defensive linemen and linebackers, and secondary, which is just safeties and corners, basically. The secondary for the Patriots, I'm going to give an A minus. It's definitely not as dominant as it was last year, unsurprisingly, because they had Patrick Chung opt out, which was a really big loss for this football team. But J.C. Jackson really stepped up as a top-notch corner. I think a lot of Patriots fans legitimately believe that he would be a number one corner on a lot of other teams, and I actually do tend to agree with that. He's had a couple rough moments, mainly against the Jets. He had a pretty rough game, but he was able to turn it around in that football game at the end of the game. And then obviously Stephon Gilmore is still really good. The only really mediocre game he had was against the Seahawks, which is against DK Metcalf, who makes a whole lot of cornerbacks look pretty mediocre, right?
Yeah, he
And
does.
there was a couple tough reps, right? But other than that, really, this Patriots secondary, I think the Chiefs game that you brought up was a really good example. They just played coverage and were able to win that game. If their offense was able to score really at all with some of the chances their defense gave them, and the fact that they had a turnover that should have been a turnover that just wasn't for some reason. It was one of the worst
Yeah.
calls I've seen this season, to be honest, to not call it a fumble. That probably would have put more points on the board and put the Patriots in the game even more. Scoreline does not do that game justice. Um, so I'm going to give the secondary an A minus. I think their secondary did a pretty good job. Yeah, there's a little bit of room for there, but for the most part, it's a top tier secondary. Front seven, I'm gonna have to give probably a C though. That is the one area where the Patriots defense took a major step back. I think against the 49ers, for example, they gave up a lot of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns that game, and it really that was the main reasons why they weren't able to stick in that game. Same thing with the Rams game a couple of weeks ago. Cam Akers and the Rams running attack just bullied the Patriots up front, and against weaker run defenses, they look good. And they look good against the Ravens, they look pretty good. Against the Cardinals, they look pretty good stopping the run. Like they've had definitely good weeks, but against these top tier running offenses, right? Teams like the 49ers and teams like the Rams, even though they may not be, I guess they're not necessarily top tier, but pretty good running offenses and running minded offensive coaches. They've struggled, and they've struggled to the point where they were unable to be in the ball game because they couldn't keep their offense on the field and the defense was on the field the entire game, just getting battered and beat down. So I'm going to have to give that area a C, maybe a C plus, just because some games they have looked really good, their front seven. But I
Hmm.
think I do credit that more to the coaching staff than necessarily the talent of their front seven pieces. They just like losing guys like Kyle Van Noy and Hightower and all those guys. It's really showing this season, and I think that they need some help on in that area of their defense. But I think you're right. Overall, I'd give the defense a solid B. Um, with their secondary definitely leading the way, and I think that is the Patriots season in review. Did we give the Patriots an overall grade? Yeah, we gave them an overall grade. So I'm gonna go with C. You said what? A C minus, D, D plus,
D plus, D
D
plus.
plus. I think that's a little harsh.
I mean, well, like if you're a Patriots fan, like I think
Okay,
where
yeah,
you're
for
just
their
used to winning.
expectations, you're
Yeah.
right. Um,
Which, like, I feel like going in, their expectation was a little low. You got the goat's gone. You had so many people opt out. You don't really know where you're getting out of Cam Newton. Is he just damaged goods, or can he turn it around? So I feel like their expectations coming in were low. But like it's still at the beginning of the season, it looked like this team is not really missing too much of a beat. They can still contend, make the playoffs. But when you have two teams on the rise in your division as the Dolphins and the Bills, like it really just set them back. Like they're just not in the same tier as those teams, and but they're not in the same tier as the Jets. Not many teams are in the same tier as the Jets, but they're kind of just like they week in week out. The Patriots are that team where they could beat you or they could lose by 20. It's a
mhm.
weird team. It's a weird team.
Yeah, I think, going back to the expectations for the Patriots, I think that most Patriots fans in the beginning of the season said, hey, we're winning at least 9 games. 9 games is the minimum. And if you
Yeah,
remember, like that over under for the Patriots was 8.5, which I thought was a really good line from Vegas. I thought they really hit the nail on the head.
yeah, they
Looks
did.
like the under is going to be hitting for that one.
Well,
Um,
I think Patriots fans, like, I mean, I'm going to say they're spoiled because you do have 6 Super Bowl rings. But coming into the season, you had, like, I think they felt like the Bills were not legit because maybe it's just like in their minds they've ran this division for so long. Well, this division is not crap anymore. Like the Bills are a legitimate Super Bowl team. The Dolphins are a young team on the rise with a young quarterback who's a franchise guy. Like the Patriots are kind of in that mode too now, where like those two teams seem like they got the head coach right, they got the quarterback right, and they have a good defense. So like the Patriots are going to have to get back in that mold, and who knows after this year, after all these players come back with COVID, they're probably going to draft a quarterback, I assume. I mean, they're going to be picking in the top 10, I would guess.
Definitely
So,
around there.
I mean, are they going to be the team that trades up for Justin Fields, or are they going to just settle for Trey Lance? I mean, that's still to be determined. But like, especially on the offensive side, they got to start like they're going to have to figure something out moving forward. Their defense at any given day with Belichick and their pieces, they can win some ball games. But if they want to get back into the classification and competing with those two teams, then they're going to have to figure out the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that next season we should see this team improve. I also think that people thought that Belichick was just going to carry them, which you can only do so much as a coach with the pieces you're given. And
Yeah.
I don't think you can really put too much of the season on Belichick because this was one of the tougher coaching jobs that you could be asked to have, a transitioning football team. I mean, the fact that he was able to make the team last as long as it did and be as dominant for as long as it was tough enough in and of itself. But now you have the new challenge of rebuilding the team. So that's going to be it for the Patriots season review.